Yes, it's another Sunday. Let me turn off the AC. Oh, I'm going to melt pretty soon. It's about a 6,000 degree day in the lovely world here. And welcome to a Remembering Dwayne Sunday. Special guest, special guest Alex Scull.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon.
And, I'm trying to do this thing where we just had it hooked up, and then now it's also okay. This is probably it. Yeah, no, it's a time that we actually remembering Dwayne, but also remembering the greatness of Dwayne's hair. Man, look at this. Dwayne had the best hair, I think, in the planet.
It was like, it had the texture of like horse hair. You know what I mean? It literally would take a lot of product. He used to use like the flat iron. He could get his hair to do anything.
It was dream hair.
Yeah.
And he really had long bangs, which is what was amazing. Is that most people had like good hair. Scully used to love good hair, but
yeah, mine's holding on.
Yeah, you're holding on, not bad.
Yeah,
but,
this is a little. I haven't had a haircut in about 8 months, so that's why I have the.
Let me just get this hooked up here, right?
The Hell's Kitchen.
So how's everything going? You're in San Francisco currently, I take it.
Yeah, it's smoky outside. It smells like smoke right now. It's been really smoky and hot and yucky. So, hooray! Enjoying the wonders of COVID and all that stuff. You know, getting back to Dwayne's hair, I would like to mention that he had like blonde eyelashes.
Say that again, Scully. Don't tell me we're going to have audio issues with you.
Uh-oh. Do you want me to switch to a microphone or something?
No, just
or a headset.
I don't know why it does that.
Anyway,
why it phases out or does whatever. It goes perfectly fine when we talk. Scully and I will talk for hours on end about stuff.
That's not true. No, Dwayne had blonde eyebrows, which made everybody think that he was like an albino, you know?
True. But he actually wasn't an albino. He was I think, you know, his blue eyes kind of shone through. One thing is for sure.
I never really checked.
I think a couple of times Dwayne told me he got pinned as Edgar Winter. And it's what's odd is that if you look at the online, the version of Frankenstein that's performed, Edgar and Dwayne do look very, very, very similar, especially in the way that they perform as well.
Well, especially when if Dwayne takes off his shirt and wears a little lipstick, exactly like that Edgar Winter coat.
So yeah, I mean, a lot of people ask me the story about Dwayne, and so I figured today is an iconic time. 25 years to today since Dwayne's passing. Can you believe that?
No, I can't. It went by in a heartbeat.
Just literally, like,
you know, every so often, every so often something will happen, like in music or something like that, and I will be like, man, Dwayne would have loved that, you know.
How many times have you said that?
Too many to count.
Yeah, and then you end up saying it so often. I mean, I find myself sometimes I'll be speaking out loud in the studio, and then I'll realize, who am I speaking to? Like kind of like speaking. You kind of like get to speak to the friends that you've lost and for so long.
Well, that's a good place to commune with the spirits.
Let's reflect a little bit on the history of Dwayne. The first time I met Dwayne was I think it was December 1985, and Skinny Puppy went to do a festival in Edmonton, and he was still with Bill Lieb and me and Ogre, and we played this festival, and Dwayne's band Water with Brandy was one of the several opening acts that were performing that day. And it's weird how you have these memories where you can remember things so clearly. I remember so clearly stepping out to see a bit of Dwayne's set. And I pulled back this curtain and was watching it. And the first thing that I'll never forget the quality of the sound that I heard. It was like instantly right away, I was like, wow, what's this guy doing? He's definitely doing something that, as a one-man band, completely surrounded by keyboards, I was completely taken aback by where Dwayne was at that moment. It was kind of funny because the first thing that Dwayne ever said to me is after sound check, we were walking backstage and Dwayne was back there with his gear, getting it together. And the first thing he said to me, he says, sounds like excessive 16K to me. I was like, wait, I had to translate that for a second. What
Was he doing this when he said it?
No, he had a piece of gear in his hand.
Oh.
And he was holding it, and not only did I, think that it was kind of like amazingly professorish of him to say the first comment that he would ever say to me as that, but also the fact that he was holding a box that he was using just as his kick drum. So it was something that he was triggering very early on that was just his bass drum. And his setup was...
Wait. Do you mean an electronic box?
Yeah, an electronic box that he was triggering.
Okay.
I'm not really too sure about what it exactly was because he didn't carry it with him through, but the sound of the kick drum was, obviously I took note in the fact that he definitely did not have excessive 16K. It's funny. I remember having a good time at that show and it was great. And afterwards, we left and went back to Vancouver. And I was talking with Bill Lieb, and Bill at that time we had gone through one small US tour where we actually had to sneak across the border even. It was the most crazy tour really, and made it back. And then Bill Lieb said, you know what, I can't do that anymore. I'm not going to go do that. And then, so he said, I'm not going to go on the road. And essentially that was the end of like our Skinny Puppy with Bill sort of in the focus. And I realized at that point, oh no, I got to find somebody new. And so the very first thing I thought of was Dwayne's comment. Sounds like I thought like that guy immediately came to my mind, impressed me. And at that time, I remember that I was at home and I said something to my girlfriend at the time, Lisa. I said, I met this guy, and then she just so happened to say, oh, he's going out with my girlfriend. So she just immediately called up her girlfriend, Linda. And
what? I didn't know this.
Yeah, and so before, a few minutes later, this is funny how these things happen. We had set up a dinner date so that Dwayne would come down from Edmonton to Vancouver, and we would go for dinner and chat.
Where'd you go for dinner? Where'd you go?
Where do you think? Can you guess?
Sitar.
Yep, absolutely. The Sitar is a restaurant where I think like many great things are forged in that place. I think it's probably my most favorite restaurant in Vancouver anyways. It's an Indian restaurant in Gastown. Been there for our whole life. And so we met, and we went back to my place after and immediately started jamming, which I thought like, when you meet somebody, it's not often that you return to your house and just immediately we started doing stuff. But the things that he was doing right away, like up until that point, I hadn't jammed with somebody like that, where he was so fluid that it could allow you to be more free. Because up to that point, I had to handle all of the electronics in Skinny Puppy and basically rein in everything, and sort of like what Dwayne was doing, the one-man band. But then when Dwayne came, it was like he brought in an energy that all of a sudden, that was the very first time that I ever reached for my radio as an instrument. because I had it there and I was sampling from it and I had it going through the system. It was the first time that we were playing and I had an extra hand all of a sudden, and I was tuning radio dials and making percussive beats for the radio. So instantly, as soon as Dwayne came along, the music was created just instantly. And so that night, we went on to make Antagonism, which is on Mine TPI. And he did that sequence, the sort of 16th note sequence that I believe we did that on the Mirage, because I just acquired a Mirage. At that time, the Mirage was kind of like a big game changer for, you know, what was going on in music. And oddly, Dwayne came along and completely already knew how to work with the whole hexadecimal system of the way the Mirage operates, and was already essentially going inside and doing things right away. I can't remember what it was, but there's a couple of examples where we have sequences that were created in the Mirage, which I don't know anybody else that used this sequencer in the Mirage, especially as good as.
I was just going to say, I'm surprised that you said sequencer in Mirage. I thought for sure you were going to say Pro One.
It is. It's an uncanny sequencer because it's not an easy accessible thing, and but the thing is that you had to be quite handy how you were going to use it too. So there's like Draining Faces. The song basically has a section in it where the rhythms basically take over at the end. We performed that on the '88 tour, Scully, at the end. It was one of the last songs. I would play the barrels on top of that sequence. That sequence is actually coming from the Mirage, which I always thought like, it is a very chuggy, very beautiful sort of like timbre. It's just, depending on what sounds you're using, but like, anyhow, the beauty of Dwayne is that he came along with an intense knowledge of his equipment. Hence his statement, excessive 16K, yes, which I see in the comments there, yes, 16 kilohertz, which means high frequencies. The type like, that hurt, the type that kind of hurt.
That's like almost dog whistle frequency.
Oh, look who came up when I started talking about
look at that.
You know what's really weird is that Rihanna has always said to me, Fisherman is Dwayne. It's weird how he has the pink.
They look a lot, they look very similar.
That's really weird is he's very, very musical. So if music happens, he's on it. And there we were just talking about that. And he just happened to walk right on up.
Dwayne, one time he was explaining to me the Kurzweil K2000, which has like this multi-layer way of adjusting parameters that's almost infinite, and I guess like they say that one of the true definitions of genius is that if you can explain something to somebody that's really complex, you know what I mean? And that Dwayne was able to kind of break down in very basic terms to me, like how the great, because he was really, really enthusiastic about the K2000 when it came out. And for him to be excited about something, I'd never really seen him that excited over something before. And then he proceeded to explain to me how this thing works. Now, I have a rudimentary understanding of it. You know what I mean? More so than if I were to read the manual. And that's because, this guy would just absorb new technology. You know what I mean? It was effortless.
I think that
excuse my fire department coming by.
He's going. It's funny. I think that was here. Dwayne's definitely gone on record as calling out the K2000 as one of the greatest synths ever invented. I mean, there's not much you can say about a synth that's like got too much under the hood. But the thing is having a guy that can drive it and understand it is another thing altogether. He got inside and did things, as I said, on a couple of chats where I'm still not totally sure how he did it. And those type of things will remain a mystery, but I'm telling you that it's a combination between having a sample inside the K2000 having this, the arpeggiator inside the K2000 basically be able to, with the mod wheel set up as a depth controller, set up the start time variation on a sample that would be longer than one hit. So thus giving you sort of like timed parameters with the mod wheel between the samples of what you had. So if you had this might get real complex for some people, but if you had like a bunch of samples like that that were being triggered by an arpeggio in that manner, and the arpeggio is played also in a state where as you change the keys, you're changing variables of those notes. So you're changing the variables of the notes, and you're also changing the offset of the start times of the samples by the mod wheel and the arpeggiator. And the thing is that Dwayne would nonchalantly do something like that, and you just stand back, and it would take you, 30 minutes to figure out how he was doing that. And it was something that I thought, like, okay, that's something I got on my list where, after Dwayne died, it was kind of daunting to say the least, to say, what did I, you had to say, what did I learn? I mean, did he absorb any of that? You got to hope that along the way, by being around each other and playing together for 9 years constantly, that basically, you absorb things. And the thing is that I'm terribly happy that I did do that. I feel I feel that definitely Dwayne is probably my greatest teacher, other than, say, the initial beginnings of Joe Visvari. But I mean, the knowledge of Dwayne, the greatest thing was, knowing you were going to learn something. So with, say, as you said, an excitement level of the K2000 or the SY77 or the ESQ1, if we go back an era, say, if we want to talk about, right after that video that I showed of Dwayne's hair, that was 2 months after I met him. So it was like basically July 1986. And at the video there, we're just about to leave on our 72 date tour of the world with Severed Heads. And so that was like this hardcore tour where we were in trucks that had been converted into traveling vehicles. And we basically, I think it was like 3.5 months. It was almost 4 months before that tour was over. But by the end, Dwayne's experiences in life and my experiences in life had both been radically altered by just the nature of traveling in those days, and also traveling in those circumstances, and also with no money. I mean, we made $6 a day to do that first 1986 tour with Severed Heads. The European tour would have been with Agrum, if you saw us there. And then we came back to the US, and we regrouped with Severed Heads again, and did probably the largest part of the tour there. But we met many challenges on that tour. This is the tour where we met challenges with, like, say, drug abuse being in front of us. Now, what was really cool is that, we were very innocent. And I kind of liked the fact that we were just pot smokers. None of us seemingly were too out of our minds, in the sense of when we traveled, we weren't crazy yet. But the first tour was a big learning experience, and I think we came home from that with a definitely altered perception of a lot of things. And that led to us also being exposed to a lot of new equipment and our first computer. So when we came back from that tour, I remember feeling even disjointed from Vancouver. I felt that in some weird ways that Vancouver was a place where it seemed if you kind of got popular outside of the city, that the city would somehow get resentful and somehow start, I don't know, it became an odd period where I think CITR bunch of people were beginning to get on the sellout theory, even, you know, because we were playing outside of town. And that happened from the moment we left. But, you know, when we got back, we realized that there was a huge support system that we were feeling all around the country, and especially in Toronto. And then Images in Vogue had moved to Toronto, and we were offered an apartment in this building on Church Street, Church and Wellesley. And Dwayne and I packed up the truck, and we loaded all of our equipment and all of our clothes and everything into this truck, and then drove across Canada. And it takes like 5 days to drive across Canada. And
oh, come on, slowpoke.
yeah, I know, we were very slow. And well, we had a lot of equipment in the truck, and I remember the truck could barely go up hills, and I'm sure we probably were overpacked as well.
I drove that same truck loaded with gear, and I did it in 3 days.
Yeah, but it's like, well, I think we stopped somewhere. I can't remember if we went to see something somewhere or stopped with Lisa's parents somewhere. But anyhow, we finally got to Toronto, and we set up the infamous Toronto studio, which is depicted in that picture that is often seen around where Dwayne is sitting in front of, let me see if I can find it here.
Yeah, we were just looking at it a second ago.
Yeah, where, yeah, this one here. So I don't know if you guys can see this, but this one here, you see that, Scully?
Yeah, of course I do. I see the Mirage too.
So yeah, we moved to Toronto, and then this was our first studio here. And also what was really new about it is that, you know, it came with big changes. So the first big change is over here on Dwayne's right. You'll see that is the Atari 1040 ST computer. It has the original Steinberg software running on it, which I believe is like literally logic point -111. And anyways,
yeah, it's the predecessor to all that stuff. Yeah.
It only had, it wasn't multi-timbral. So basically, oh no, I'm sorry, it was multi-timbral in the sense that you could use 16 MIDI channels, but you could not define, you couldn't have, say, an instrument, say up here, this on MIDI channel 1, this one would have to be on MIDI channel 2, this would be MIDI channel 3, MIDI channel 4, and so on and so on. So this was our main controller here, which is the ESQ. And then over here, just in front of Dwayne,
S900.
S900. Is we had 2 Mirages because I had one and Dwayne had one. And then our big purchase of the year was the Emax, which
That's
is on
the Emax. That's the Emax 2.
This is the first one. This is the gray one. I think this is the Emax 1.
Oh, that's the gray one. I can't see from on my thing.
Yeah, I got the Emax 2 later, but so
yeah, that would have been.
We moved here shortly. I guess it was in October of '87, and we started work on what would eventually be Vivisect 6. And so we started. This was our mixer here in front of Dwayne. You can see that it's just a really basic mixer. We had 2 digital delays. These delays were used to sample almost all of our drum sounds, if you can believe it or not. This is the radio that I was talking about here, where it was like a thing that my dad gave me. It had an 8-track player in it and recorder. It was the first album I ever recorded was on this box. We would take 99% of our radio samples through that, and this is a PCM 41. We go from here to here into our well, at this time 3 samplers. Over here was the multi-mood. But so this was the better part of our setup for, believe it or not, for Vivisect, Rabies, and Doubting Thomas. And what's funny is that this wall here was kind of like neighboring on Images in Vogue, Gary and Dale. And some nights we would be so loud, we'd be just playing. And oddly, we didn't even monitor through stereo speakers, but we monitored through a bass amp, which is below all this here in front of Dwayne.
Would I be mistaken in saying that that's also the same setup that the original Edward Caspell Tear Garden meeting happened on? It happened at the Toronto apartment.
Well, no, it actually didn't. It happened before that.
What?
Yeah,
Oh,
Edward and the Center Bullet and that EP predate this time period. We actually recorded that before. Actually, I had met Dwayne. I had recorded that like literally at the beginning of 1986. Dwayne, I met in July of '86. Well, no, I had met him in November or December of '85, but I hadn't actually met him again until that time. But
anyway.
anyways, yeah. Long story short, we moved to Toronto, and I don't know if it has any more of our original setup here. I don't think it does. But surprisingly, this became the mainstay of our setup. And then living next to Images in Vogue was hilarious because we could literally get away with murder. And then I think some songs, you know, definitely written for Hilt and those bands that we also recorded there was intended to go through the wall to Gary and those guys. So it was a glorious time period. I tried to show the original drawing here. I don't know if it's going to get a lot of reflection, but this drawing, and this is online as well. I've posted it many times. This was a drawing that Dwayne drew. It's probably my most favorite thing that I have from Dwayne. I like the holy fuck sort of comment with me and Dwayne standing there looking at our setup. So what this setup is what I just showed you. It basically is just the keyboards drawn out with the connections, how we connected the MIDI, and how we basically made music. And from there, we were then destined to obviously have to go on tour again. And then one day where I was walking down Yonge Street I'm not sure if I was with Dwayne or not.
You were.
And, oh, was I? Okay.
Yeah.
And a truck rolls up, and it was that truck that we're talking about again, wasn't it?
The Network Whale.
The Network Whale, we used to call it. And who should be in it but a 19-year-old Alex Scull. Our first meeting there on the street. We're about to meet Alex and go do what's known as the Euro Trauma Tour 1988.
That was you asked me for my ID because you didn't believe my name. That
Alex
was
Scull. I know. I thought I was a little taken aback by that. I thought, like, how can that be possible?
it's possible.
But
I've driven that van, that truck from Vancouver with this guy that was also on tour, and when we got to Toronto, we were just hammered and so tired, you know. It was so surreal just as like pull up on the sidewalk and see you guys. Oh, hey, there they are right now. And this was the first time I'd ever left home. You know, I was 19 years old. This was my first tour ever. So it was quite a unusual thing to run into you guys on the street.
I believe that's you there on the kit, Scully. Do you see how long your hair is?
Yeah, it's about as long as it is now. Yeah, that's me.
Even more of a mop, though.
That's 1989. That's
right. This would have been the year. That's Dwayne's girlfriend Corinne at the time. It was Rave. This is in Mushroom Studios. This would have been a typical case scenario in the room there. But
what a great sounding room that was.
Legendary. I don't think you can really beat the experience of recording this in that room.
And recording the 2-inch tape.
That's right, and that's a homemade recording console. That's marijuana, as I said. You know,
same studio where Loverboy's Get Lucky was recorded. Heart did their first couple records there.
Heart did Barracuda in there. Can you believe that?
Yeah.
Barracuda. And then, the ghost of Ron Tabat, they say, is the ghost that haunts the studio.
No shit.
Yeah.
That's gone now, right?
No, actually, we have confirmed that it is still there, but this control room is gone.
Oh, what happened to the desk?
I think that I think the desk is gone.
Oh,
You know. Oh, by the way, this was Dwayne's favorite food.
oh, that's the cheese sticks.
Get him down at that hasty market. Kenny, what's the slogan down at that hasty market?
Yeah, tasty, just goddamn tasty. I still remember.
Oh my God. Look, hey, there's me.
Yeah, some late night.
God, I'm
mushroom-
really young there. Just a child.
Absolute child. Well, so I mean, you were only about 20 at that point, right?
2021, yeah. I would have been just 21, I think. I believe that was June of '89.
So
Oh my God.
the 1988 Euro Trauma Tour has been depicted here on the Patreon page, broken down into 18 parts. I believe it's almost like, I don't want to say it's like 12 hours long or how long it is, but it's darn long. Have you made? I sent you those, Scully, right?
Yeah, yeah. I trust me. I've poured over them. It's it's painful at times, painfully embarrassing, but it's an unbelievable time capsule that we have, and that's something that I think we can attribute to Dwayne as well.
Yeah, and that's the great part, is that Dwayne basically decided at a certain point that he was going to carry a video camera with him, and he was the first one that decided, we're taking a camera to Europe, and thanks to him, all that stuff was captured. Otherwise, that just definitely wouldn't have been done. That wouldn't have happened.
A lot of people kind of don't realize that in 1988, not everybody did this. You know what I mean? I can remember like Dwayne would take the camera and he would film things that I thought that were like the minutia, you know what I mean? Of us just like sitting on the bus and like, why are you filming this? You know, this isn't like a postcard worthy moment, you know? And it's great to have all that stuff that he had the presence of mind to preserve, you know? It's incredible to have that.
We're operating on, so anyways. Yeah, no, it was really, especially when you look back at it after and you see, Scully, we had our switchblade.
That's one of my favorite moments, the knife show.
The knife show. Okay, if you really want to see all this stuff, you got to come back and, oh yeah, there's a legendary Dwayne moment.
I have that stencil on the back of a leather jacket.
He was always the one to basically mark, I think it was every dressing room, he would take it upon himself to leave that mark. Look at that hair again, though.
And it's a stencil of the was it the draining face? It's the draining faces 12-inch.
Addiction
or deep? No, down Trauma Hounds 12-inch.
Dwayne,
Addiction. That's right.
I think it's addiction. Yeah.
Yeah. That's the addiction.
I don't know who made it, but
didn't Lionel or Fabienne make it?
Oh yeah, that's true. They were always the one to make those crafty things, and they would always show up and have some present for us whenever we'd show up. You know, like setting up in those old days. Scully, you did a better part of the work of this setup of the stage there.
This setup that you're having to show is the Linz, Austria one where we did where Snakefinger died in the dressing room.
Right.
And like Linz, Austria is like, I believe, the birthplace of Hitler.
And didn't we get scared by ghosts after in this particular venue?
Well, I sure did.
Yeah. Yeah, it was really it was one of those times where, can you think, like, was it tough for you to load all that equipment and set it up and do all that stuff?
Well, it kind of was. It's it was my first tour. I was really green, you know what I mean? So I was just eager to do anything, any part of it. But there were, um, when I look back in hindsight, knowing I know about like touring and concerts, there were a lot of above and beyond the call of duty on this tour, you know, having to, fill a dog with like fake guts, and having to find like dirt that Ogre could like make mud and smear all over his face. A lot of unusual requests. In addition to like building this cage contraption, that's me on the left there in the hood. We built that in Vancouver out of like 2-inch aluminum pipe, and it had to be assembled and tested every day. In addition to the barrels, the keyboards, and the weird stands,
You know,
all that
for
stuff.
being a stage manager and having to do all that setup and tear down, and then also put Ogre through the rigors on that tour, that was one heck of a job.
I loved
I,
it. Best job I ever had.
but I remember that, over the course of that tour, again, it was another time where, it was, I can only say, I guess we grew up around each other in those conditions on the road, on the, like, just being thrown into it, not being even really knowing, what it is we were going to encounter. Oh, that's Mufti from Neubauten.
Well, we saw like Europe, of the Cold War era Europe. We saw East Germany and Berlin, the Berlin Wall and stuff. While it was still very much the Berlin Wall with communists on the other side. That was a life-changing moment for me, going to like Checkpoint Charlie and all that stuff. All of my experiences of like World War II and Germany and Europe kind of came through like the filtered lens of American TV as a kid, like Hogan's Heroes and stuff like that. And, uh, having that moment there, I think, like you said, we grew up really fast.
We really did. Look at that shot of Dwayne's hair.
Fuck. Perfect. First thing in the morning.
I believe, this is 86. So this is right when I first met Dwayne, just the first week. But after 88, we came back, and I'll never forget, like, you have those times when you have a conversation with somebody and something scares you, and then you don't know why it did. Well, I was driving back across Canada with Dwayne, and we started talking about like drug experiences. And I remember that I said to him, man, there's one thing for sure, is that you will never in your life I will never be able to touch a needle, because I have a needle phobia. And so I think that's kind of a blessing, in that I know that I'll never touch a needle. I have to close my eyes if I get a shot, And I was expecting him to be like, me too. Well, you said the same. But no, Dwayne kind of was this odd silence. And I was like, what do you think about that? And he said, well, one time I tried it, and I don't know, he kind of explained it. It was a little bit of a weird type of euphoria. And all of a sudden I wanted him to say, but I'd never do that again. And I said, so you never do that again, right? And he said, I don't know. And it was really weird, is that was like right again when I first met him in like 1987 or something. And then it kind of scared me at first. I thought like I immediately remember having a vision of not good. And it's not, I don't even think that Dwayne even touched any drugs like that at any point that I knew him. Like whenever we toured and we went on the road, we did, have our challenges with like tour managers that wanted to feed us like lines of Coke or things. But I never really, saw, a situation where Dwayne was like, trying to basically, we were always just like happy with weed.
Yeah.
as far as I could tell from day one. I got some other cool pictures here, and I pulled out of Dwayne. I don't know if you can see them.
I was gonna wear some purple today, but I don't have anything that's purple.
That's right. Dwayne's favorite color is purple.
He went
Yeah,
through one of these
little
periods
couch.
where his hair was purple, everything was purple.
Sitting in Dwayne's living room there. This is what I would see every night. I'd see a guy with perfect hair over there.
Look at him.
There's Dwayne and Jennifer. There's Dwayne with his, what I would call the best bangs in rock. And as depicted, as I'm saying, me and him, I mean, that's what we did is we, you know, every album that we made, every song that we made together, there was a joint to be had on every one of them. And I've always been kind of a pro weed advocate, and I think that in a weird way, when I strolled into, well, I can skip ahead a little bit, but you know, I'll get into how things kind of got out of control and where they headed in a bit. But one thing I wanted to say again about Dwayne was he was also capturing a lot of cool stuff that, here, I had one marked here. So if we were at a venue, remember this, Scully, how he would be like,
Oh yeah, that's the Bronco, the place in Dallas, the Bronco Bowl or something like that.
yeah. And Dwayne would skateboard the venue, and he would just videotape the venue. And also all these just great things that.
Now, Dwayne was kind of like a frustrated video artist as well. I can remember many times going to visit him and Corinne at the apartment over on Nelson, and he'd like have like a VCR remote in one hand and the cable remote in the other, and he would literally like record like 3 seconds of something that he saw in a commercial or something, and he'd make these video compilations of just random stuff that would kind of like be like video sampling, you know what I mean? And he would always pair that with music, and I always loved that kind of the random magic of random images and random sounds kind of going together.
Yeah, that was a long-standing tradition between us when we were living together, is that in those days it was really funny, is that they would have this remote control for the TV that actually had these, I don't know if you remember, they had like push buttons.
Yeah.
And but the thing is that if you're musical minded, you could tap out a rhythm on those things. So
Totally.
we would be like, and
No, Dwayne would do like strobe edits like that. You know what I mean?
yeah. So a lot of the things that we did during the recordings of many albums and stuff were always approaches.
Hey, Tim Gore.
Always approaches with noise, and particularly radio noise and inevitably TV noise. So by the time, you know, we got into this tour, which is, I believe this is Last Rites, Dwayne's setup actually had a very meticulously, he worked really hard on getting his keyboard to be able to trigger audio samples that were coming from a videotape. And I think that, oh my God, no, Bill Morrison.
Bill Morrison.
Anyhow, I didn't know where that was going.
Yeah, none of us did.
But by this time, you know, the setup that Dwayne had, I mean, it's really a shame that, you know, there isn't more video of, like, say, the Too Dark Park era and the Last Rites era as far as like setups are concerned. We've got a lot of show footage, but we don't have a lot of setup footage, which, you know.
Well, I can kind of remember the stuff. I know for Last Rites, Dwayne had the K2000 by then. We also had the Prophet 5 on tour. That very first Emax, I think, was still touring in '92.
I think he had the SY-77 up there too.
Yeah, the SY. God, he loved the SY-77.
Oh, for sure. He said that was one of the best things he ever had as well.
Yeah.
I think anything, you know, it was like getting into FM synthesis and you know,
Oh, Chunk Blower.
chunk blower, yeah. You know, probably one of the coolest things is that, you know,
Wait, there's a scene here where Bill's hair catches on fire.
yeah, Bill's hair catches fire, and there he is. There's Dwayne.
Yeah.
And I think Bill has a name for him here. It's called Speck or something.
Or Squelch or something.
Tow truck!
Tow truck.
Hey, Squelch! Tow truck!
Squelch.
Squelch.
Yeah, like Bill had so much product in his hair when there's like a flame scene where it flashes over in the car, and like just the residual just the residual stuff in his hair made his hair catch fire.
I think this stunt, Gary Smith has said, became a little too real at this moment, and they had to put Bill's hair out with their hands.
Yeah, they did. I was there.
They were literally handcuffed to that wheel too, right? If anything went wrong.
Yeah. But the
not such a good thing.
oof, right there.
Yeah.
That was Bill's hair actually catching fire.
Classic. I think I was away in Jamaica when you guys filmed this, so that's why
Yeah.
I wasn't there.
I was doing PA work on that shoot.
Nice. Yeah. Well, I ended up working with Gary and Jim Van Beber on the score on that. It's like more of the more on that side of things. But yeah, a lot of these things here that I have here, a lot of these pieces of collage stuff, it was like stuff we created during the Skinny Puppy era, of which just endless amounts of stuff.
Do you have any of the video collages that he did?
Yes, I do. As a matter of fact, I've been featuring them on my Patreon as well. I had something here. Oh yeah, this. What's weird is that this video, even though it's for download of 23 years, it used to be a video that was in sort of like the corner of the studio. And it was like, oh, you know, it was always turned on and off just for fun here and there. But this was the first time I think Phil Western ever came to the studio. And we're meeting with Dwayne. And then he went on to, so my point here is that always roll your video camera, because later, I mean, with both of these guys being gone now, just having this video footage of like the first time that I'm certain this was the first day that Phil came into the studio. And, you know, that's about the only thing that makes me feel all right now is that Dwayne and Phil could potentially be hanging together again.
It's nice to think about that.
Yeah,
Dwayne.
I mean, I know I've jumped ahead again, but thought I would sort of like talk about how video and like having it around later becomes, I swear, you know, you may see it as your VHS tape lying around one day at first, but then later it becomes like, oh, is there a minute on there? Is there another minute you can share with your friend? Or is there, you know, you'll search videotapes in a different way. and really is a special thing to be able to do, to be able to find stuff. I was searching for a video, believe it or not, I've searched everywhere in my house through every videotape because I know I had a tape of going to the Real Jerk in Toronto with Al Nelson and Dwayne, the very last night that we were in Toronto. And then we went back afterwards and mimed a whole bunch of Hilt songs.
Would that have been the flu? That would have been the flu then, though, right?
Yeah, it would have been the flu then, yeah. And I've searched for this tape high and low just to share that evening one more time. But unfortunately, it passed.
Wow.
Yeah.
How much, have you been able to digitize everything that you've been able to collect from Dwayne, from his video compilations and stuff?
I mean, I've tried to digitize everything just to back it up. And as far as I can find, a lot of the tapes, unfortunately, they're like unlabeled tapes. So you'll find like a VHS tape somewhere and you'll have to search through it to see, because a lot of times we recorded television. And then so there'll be a break of television and then there'll be like a live piece of footage and you'll be like, oh, wow, that's a little piece of gold. I've been searching for those like kind of like constantly. But you know, one thing about the songs, I think I've said this before, is that when we used to work at first on songs, we would dictate them in such a way that I can go back now and work on them. So if you look at this, you'll see that it actually says, okay, what the tempo was, what the idea's name was, what the discs are you would use in the ESQ, the Emax, the Mirage, and any other sound. And then we would sometimes say, oh, this sounds like Puppy, or this would be Tear Garden. And then inevitably, this song didn't end up being used. But you know, the whole book is full of like songs, even some familiar ones. I know Warlock and everything is in here. I can see Dog Shit, Who's Laughing Now. Basically, could go in and like, you know, hopefully try and recreate some of that stuff if I wanted to. But what it would entail is hooking up the entire original Pro 24 setup and then have that be able to be set up in the same manner with the same MIDI channels, which I have done once. And I did transfer a whole bunch of stuff. I transferred a new version. I'm like kind of like made a new version of Warlock and stuff. But you know, as we moved forward and we got further into time and things became more comfortable, you know, the shame was, and really the problem really started, is that Dwayne was working really hard on music, and quite often the music didn't get utilized for the band because there was some weird, odd situation where, you know, without sounding mean-spirited or whatever, but you know, there was a certain sort of thing Ogre had where if certain people played on songs and he knew that certain songs were written by certain people at that time, he wasn't as interested to hear them. So it was a really sad state of affairs at that moment that Dwayne became kind of frustrated and presented a number of songs that basically didn't get utilized. And inevitably, we would end up utilizing those, you know, either on Cyberactive or Doubting Thomas, or we would do, you know, inevitably, I'm sure a lot didn't get used at all. But as things progressed, you know, the depth of how much we started working on side projects became sort of like as paramount as working on Skinny Puppy, because in a large part of the way, you know, Dwayne's ideas could be expressed more thoroughly into the side projects. Say, for instance, in Hilt or in Doubting Thomas, a song like Ideal is a classic example of a Dwayne song, taken to the limit. And even with Download, some classic moments of Download when we first started working on Download were obviously intended for Skinny Puppy. But the ideas were, I think there was 20 something ideas Dwayne had written when he had come to make the process. And I had matched them. We had a board. I think it was like, there was like 47 songs on it that we had written between us. And inevitably, a lot of those songs did not get utilized for the process again. So by the end, there was a lot of animosity that got built up, and tension too, between writing an album under that setting. And then, so Dwayne inevitably got more and more and more kind of perturbed and stressed by the idea of work and what type of work was being done. You know, when we were in the house in Malibu for 6 months, you can imagine that if you come into the idea of an album with a lot of songs, you feel like you're coming in well armed. And it's kind of like the feeling you get when you want to do something. It's like you come in and you want to make the best of it. And to know at that time that the songs weren't really hitting the point for others was a big frustration. I know Dwayne had kind of immersed deeply into techno in around 1993, and it's kind of like at the forefront of what was like the raver. Remember when he would show up with the Ren and Stimpy outfits, where he would have a cape, and at one time he had like Ren and Stimpy boxers on top of his outside of his pants, and that's when he went really heavily into. He had heard Asen in 1992, and it completely changed his life.
He was one of the first. He was one of the first people that ever told me about like drum and bass, you know, and that was around that time.
He was very early on to it, at a time when people. I remember at the time they would say "ooh techno," and techno was kind of like, I don't know, it wasn't really embraced right away, and the only place that you were really getting purity of techno was at raves. And the thing is that it interested Dwayne heavily. So there was like a kind of parting of the seas there, so to speak, and that created a huge problem and rift in. The biggest argument that I ever saw was between Dwayne and Ogre on that album, and that was it. It was like I basically knew kind of that you know, soon thereafter, you know, we would return, leave that house, and come back to Vancouver, and we would continue working on the album for better part of 6 months at that point. And then Ogre forwarded a resignation, and I know that when Dwayne got that was like that was, I wanted to give hope, and I wanted to build up a feeling of, don't worry, you know, we're going to be okay. But I could see he was pretty terrified by the thought. And then, you know, inevitably we were already working on a new album on the side, just for fun anyways. And then all of a sudden we started to get offers for this album. And then all of a sudden we started to hear and see that there was some problems with Dwayne. And he kept them quite secret. And so the thing is that you couldn't really help him right away. And you know, it was a thing where I was with Mark Spivey, and Mark Spivey is an occupational therapist, and so me hanging with the therapist guy, I kind of felt like, well, if there's anything that we can do to help Dwayne, we're definitely going to do it. But it seemed like anytime there was something that we'd find out about or something that would be concerning, we were told basically, oh no, it's under control, don't worry, you don't need to go there. Because I think that there was some possible, I don't know why, but there was a fear level that was, the reality of it being real for Dwayne, I think was a big scare for him. And I think his shirt sleeve fell open one day when I was at the studio, and I saw his arm was had a bunch of marks on it, and I said, "My God, are you okay?" And he kind of reacted like, you know, he was concerned for himself, but yet there was somebody else that was in the driver's seat sometimes. He kind of made this remark one time. Somebody else was in the driver's seat at certain points. So he returned back home to his parents' house in Edmonton. And we went on, I remember I worked throughout the entire summer and was working on Download Furnace. This is after Ogre's resignation to Skinny Puppy, and the label had basically stopped us from continuing work on the Process album. So it was like kind of like a done deal. It was like, okay, that's it. So we're basically saying, okay, what are we going to do now? We're taking some songs that we had made for Skinny Puppy and working with them. But most of the album we had actually made as a new band. So I was excited to share that with Dwayne. And I know I've probably told this story many, many times, but I woke up sometime into this period when Dwayne wasn't there. I think it was literally about a week before. And I had the most vivid, horrible nightmare that Dwayne was dead. And I woke up in tears. And Aaron said, "Hey, what's wrong?" And I said, "I just had a dream that Dwayne was dead, and it was just far too real." And it wasn't because I was worrying that he would die of drugs, or because I actually never really thought that Dwayne, that would happen to him. I didn't see him as being a person that I don't know why. It would just seem like out of touch. And so, you know, as time went on and I was working on the album, and that dream hit me, Dwayne returned to the studio. And when the day he walked into the studio, the door opened and I said, "My God, I am so glad to see you." And he goes, "Why? What's the big deal?" I think I grabbed him and hugged him. And he said, I said, "Dwayne, I had the most horrible dream that you were dead." And it was like the most vivid dream. And I just literally, from that, it's just so intense to have had this discussion with him. And so every day from that point on, not every day, but some days when he'd leave, he'd say, "Don't worry, I'm not going to die." And I would be like thankful of that. When you'd say, "Good night, see you tomorrow. Don't worry, I'm not going to die." And we were well underway to work on the album. And it seemed like everything was going great. And we got into mixing. We got into the studio. We're actually mixing with Rave, even though Rave isn't credited on the album. Rave kind of, I don't know what his deal was, why he didn't want to be credited. But that's another story. And somewhere during the mix of Mother Son, Dwayne came to me and said, "I need to speak to you for a second." And I'm like, "Okay." Took me out in the hallway and he said, "Do I look different to you?" And I said, "No." It was because I'm using again. And immediately I just saw his heart and my heart sink. Heart sank together there for a second. We're like, "Oh no." And I think I almost wanted to shed a tear. I said, "What are we going to do?" He goes, "I need to go back home again." So I took him, and immediately I took him back to his place. And sadly, I kind of had this talk with him on the way back where, you have a talk with somebody where you say, please don't do it again. Please, think about all the people that you can call right now for help, and we'll be there for you. And something about it really frustrated him because he was down about it. He was so down that before he talked to me, I was wondering, but he was sitting underneath his keyboards. And that's why I said, "What's wrong?" And he said, "Can I talk to you?" Like literally sitting underneath that stand that you saw in that picture. So I said, "What are we, something like, please remember us. Like, if you feel like so tempted to go and do more, please like call upon us." And he said, "I'll see what I can do, but I don't know what I'm going to do because he's here." And then he got out of the car, and instead of saying, "See you later," he looked at me and he said, "Goodbye, Kevin." And I was like, this is not good. And it left me with this feeling that I'll never forget. because in those days, Dwayne took the bus home to Edmonton again. And that's like about a 15-hour bus ride. And of course, he didn't have a phone or anything in those days. So you had to wait for him to get home and to get settled and to get in touch with him. So I didn't actually get in touch with him until 2 days before today, 25 years ago. And we spoke, and I said, how is it going? And he said, well, things are okay. I'm doing okay. And then once again, he said, except for the guy sitting over there. And I was like, trying to just say anything positive I could. But Dwayne was really kind of struggling at this moment. And he said something to me that it kind of, I don't even want to repeat what he said, because it wasn't something he said. It was something that somebody else said to him. And that's something I'm going to lead into a story now that is like probably the most intense story, but it's the story of how this all happened really, and what I think is the darkest part of this whole thing. So, as you know, later, I remember the day that Dwayne died. Like, I can remember it like clockwork. I woke up and today, and I believe the OJ trial was something that made me get up early in those days. Go figure. We used to talk about the OJ trial a lot, actually, which is really weird. But I got up and then I went to the studio, normal course of normal day. And on that day, I decided I'm going to clean my drum set. So I was cleaning my drums. I was getting all in there and stuff like that. And the phone rang. And it was Diane, Dwayne's sister. And she said, very calmly, she said, we've got a problem. And I said, how can I help with the problem? Well, Dwayne's gone. And at first I interpreted that as Dwayne had run away. Dwayne was driving somewhere. Dwayne was walking somewhere. He was lost. And it took me until I think Diane then said, no, Dwayne died. That it like took me that, I can't remember how long it took me, but I'll remember exactly what I was looking at out the window, how I was looking at it, how long I looked at it for, and then how long it took before I began to sort of like break up. And it wasn't long before, obviously, I called Phil Western on the phone and I said, Phil, you need to come over to the studio right away. He was across the street at the record shop, which he ran at that time. And immediately then thereafter, I called Dave Ogilvy, Rave. He was down in the studio with Trent Reznor and those guys. And I called him and spoke to him briefly. I got he was in the middle of a session. But and then Rolling Stone magazine called me like 3 seconds later, and I was like, my God, you guys are quick. Like, immediate, like whatever. But one thing that I remembered when I spoke to Diane is that I think we can talk about this now because, the amount of time has gone by that a lot of the people that are involved actually don't even exist anymore. But I said, where do you think Dwayne got the heroin from? She said, there was a package here, and the package says, I maybe should use a pseudonym, but the thing is that the name will probably get out. I will use his pseudonym though. The name on the package said Greg Black. And I said, I know exactly who that is. And he happens to be right across the street right now working with Phil Western in the record store. As a matter of fact, I've known Greg Black since the 8th grade when we were in high school together. And he was one of the kids that would come in and bring in records and talk about them. And because he had kind of a Belgian English accent, when he spoke about music and stuff like that, people all listened. So I remember Greg being the first guy to bring in the Cars record, bring in the Clash record, or even be supportive if he had heard that you liked punk, he would then give you a nod. So inevitably we kind of started hanging out around Greg, and Greg had a punk band, and they played at the Buddha, the Smiling Buddha, and they got kind of semi-known. They're kind of like a North Van punk band, and they would perform even at the high school where I went. And inevitably, we ended up even jamming together a few times. And I'd end up over at his house with parties and stuff like that, and became quite friendly with him, but never to the point where it's like calling on a daily basis or anything like that. So zip forward a little while, and then I had moved on. I had gone to Japan on a youth exchange program, and then when I got back, I met Gary Smith. Long story short, Gary and I ended up getting an apartment together. And in this apartment, there became a time period where, being the young kids that we were experimenting with early form of ecstasy. I guess you might want to call it MDA at the time. And it became kind of a regular thing that we were doing. It was kind of like it kind of actually went well with the music, industrial music, and the entire scene was unfolded upon us in the same manner under those same conditions. So not only was the scene exciting and new, but it also came with drug, sort of like induced weekends. And on these drug induced weekends, sort of became the beginnings of what would become everything to follow. So really, Skinny Puppy was formed out of these parties. The equipment was there on the floor one night. That's how the first Skinny Puppy song was written, was at one of these parties. Also at one of these parties, I oddly looked over one night, and there was Greg Black sitting on the couch. And I thought, like, this is strange, because he came from my North Van crew, and I didn't know that he knew anybody at this other place. I didn't know how it could be possible that he could know anybody. So I thought, like, I always thought that was strange. But, I knew of him as being a guy that, at this time had formed a different band. Oddly, his band was called Red Rum Murder. And he had performed a few times and sort of had become semi-jaded in a certain sort of way. In other words, he had kind of developed perspective musically that he had a heavy opinion. And I remember that when I made the first Skinny Puppy song at said party, with him being there, I just turned to him at one point and I said, "Hey, I'm going to lay a guitar track down on this. You want to play guitar?" And he said, "Oh, gladly." Picked up the guitar, and he wasn't really monitoring the track. I was just saying, play like a muted funk, a muted funk thing, and I'm going to record that. So I would punch it in over what is now the song Canine on Back and Forth, still the original track. And he was happy, and I remember that shortly thereafter, as I was working on a second song and a third song, also at the same apartment, Greg was coming by more often, and then more often, and more sooner than not, I realized that it seemed like he was waiting for the call for to be another track to play on, and he was also composing at the same time, and he was kind of like almost trying to, I'm going to say, he became competitive, almost trying to say lure Ogre with what was also like sort of like in another project. At that time, it wasn't uncommon for us all to make projects after projects with people. People could make a project every day, and so that's kind of like, it didn't really matter, but it was like kind of like what was going on. So I kind of saw Greg as the guy that inevitably, shortly thereafter, kind of developed a bit of a negative attitude towards the fact that I didn't really involve him on any more material after that. So he and I kind of like went our own ways, and I saw Greg here and there, but and I could sense that with the success of any sort of Skinny Puppy future thing that happened, which happened very quickly, that Greg became very pessimistic. And even I heard back through other people, he calls you a rock star. So I'll be like, oh, well, that doesn't surprise me a bit, considering I was in a band called Images in Vogue, and we were kind of seen at that time as, you guys don't have any underground credibility to make industrial music or anything like that. So I was often pegged derogatory terms for things in that way, or at least it felt that way, certainly from Greg. So as time went on, it wasn't something that I took to heart. It wasn't something that I felt like, I needed to challenge or whatever. But as we move forward in time and we reaches our challenge of going through, certain stages of drugs, I shortly thereafter I had to stop doing what was being done at those parties, mainly because I hallucinated pretty severely a couple of times, some pretty hardcore hallucinations that made it so I couldn't do it again. But the rest of the guys continued and the parties continued for quite some time. And as we move forward, I realized that weed was really the only motivating factor, that if I smoked weed and I made music, that basically that was the factor of how I remained sort of like focused. If I did anything else, forget it. Not even drinking, just weed. And so that became a philosophy. And then so, when Dwayne joined and stuff like that, we kind of bonded on that philosophy. And we basically, with Rave and that crew, we basically continued. On the other hand, Ogre had some serious issues happening with him during, I don't know when it started, but well into Last Rites. And I know he went through some great challenges, and it affected us all. To live around it and to be around it, Scully, you were there. To be around it was tough. I remember that I can't even remember if there was, I know I didn't speak to Ogre I'm not sure if it was all of Last Rites or pretty much, a good portion of that tour. We were in such separate worlds. I can almost say that it might have been that way on Too Dark Park as well.
I think it might have started in Too Dark Park.
Yeah. So there was two different worlds, completely different camps. And it has pretty much remained that way with Skinny Puppy. That's a fact. And I don't mean drug use, I mean just two different camps. But as we move forward into the process, and we made the most ludicrous idea of listening to Rick Rubin and American Recordings to move into a house to do recordings, I kind of thought, like, at the time, well, I'm merely excited to go live in California. And I thought, like, how stupid is that? Really, that was really, really, really a stupid idea. And I've regretted it ever since. I'm also really regretted the idea that American Recordings threw many producers at us, saying they thought that, quote, Ray was not a million-selling producer, and that, we should consider Brian Eno, or should we consider Adrian Sherwood, producers well out of the reach of what we were able to get. And so it opened this big door of of shit that basically destroyed the inner balance of our band, which was crucial for a real Skinny Puppy album. And I took a lot of the blame for that, and I see why. I mean, I could have stood up and been the adamant one and said, fuck all this, fuck all that, and fuck all this, which I should have done. I wish that I'd done. And I wish we had done the album the regular way. I'm sure that if we had done the album the regular way and not gone to California, that Dwayne
I think you need to preface that by saying that this was 95 when you guys had fulfilled your contract with Capitol and Network.
93.
And now 93, yeah. Sorry, it came out in 95. And American wanted to kind of shake things up. Let's get a new producer. Let's take him out of Vancouver. Let's put him in Los Angeles. It was a recipe for disaster, if you ask me.
Yeah, it was a typical case scenario of what you might read in the paper or the book about the record company overmolding a band, over stirring in, and then I'm going to blame myself for me being stupid enough to listen or even fall into the trap, but we did, and all three of us did. I do take the blame from a lot of people for what happened, and so be it. But the thing is that unfortunately it happened to a group, and then we also had some pretty horrible management at the time. So anyways, everything got fucked. And we went into the house in Malibu with the settings of a complete perfect storm. And a perfect storm it was. The house, 6 months, a big house, Rick Rubin's house, in fact, it wasn't then, it is now, on Zuma Beach in Malibu. We weren't partiers, we actually worked, but the strange thing was that the drug use, I guess, was secret at first and then became more rampant over time. I don't want to blame certain individuals, but it was a big mistake bringing our personal friends with us into that house. Because in reality, the boredom of being there for the people that were with us was the reason why drugs were first introduced to the house. And then as soon as the drugs were first introduced to the house, it became a common scene that there would be a dealer roll up in the driveway, and then people would be running out to it like it was the ice cream truck. And so inevitably, I became involved once again with doing drugs, even though I had always said to myself that I would never use drugs again. I started smoking heroin at that point. And I don't know why. It was obviously because the person that I was with. And I just had a shallow.
It became part of the environment too. It wasn't
Part
just
of the
you.
environment of Vancouver. Before we left, it was toxic. It was so sad that at that time, to see how common it became to see people smoking what they called a foiler, which was a piece of tinfoil with a little bit of heroin on top, and you put a lighter underneath and you toke it. And
also known as chasing the dragon.
Yeah. So this became, for a little while there, a regular thing there, at least for I know my side. Dwayne's side, I can't really speak for, but I know that it became a situation where I was playing in the studio one day, and Dwayne came out with a full-length mirror, 7-8 foot full-length mirror, and grabbed it above his head and smashed it on the ground as hard as he could, and it made the most hugest sound you've ever, like crashing sound. And it sounded like literally somebody had just had enough. And I talked to Dwayne about that. And what had happened was that we had been waiting for months and months and months for songs to be worked on and songs to be completed. And the pace at the song, looks like we lost Scully. The pace at which we were moving was driving Dwayne crazy. We couldn't get vocals done. We didn't have a producer there that basically could handle the job of what was known then as being the producer. Literally, we thought when we went in there that we could do it, and we learned the hard way that basically we couldn't do it. So, I'm going to give a big thumbs up to Rave for being the best vocal producer of Ogre that has ever existed. Rave knew how to work with the band, and Rave was really the genius behind how that worked. So, moving on, we left there, Malibu, kind of in defeat. And luckily, I had decided that, well, not so luckily, actually, now that I think about it, when I returned back to Vancouver, my house, my apartment, after not being there for 6 months, had turned into a literal heroin den. So the people that were living there were selling heroin from my apartment. And it was bad. And the problem was that I got back there, and instead of saying, hey, you guys got to go, I said, give me a foiler. Big mistake. So
wow.
I knew I had my own challenges to go through at that point. This was 1994, April 30th, 1994 into May. So during that month, it was during that time when we got the studio, we got Subconscious Studios, and we formed the basis of Subconscious, the company that is now us. And I remember I had people coming into the studio though saying, are you okay? Are you okay, man? And I thought, like, why is everybody coming into the studio saying, are you okay? Actually, I thought I felt quite normal. And it wasn't until when I was walking down the road one day and I said to myself, oh, I'd done like 3 or 4 foilers and I'd had 3 triple coffees at Starbucks. And I was walking down the street and I said, you know what? I feel as good right now as if I never did anything. And I realized how hypocritical that was and how fucking ludicrous that was. And I said, it was time at that exact moment I got myself on a plane. And I don't even know why or how or where, but I took myself to Toronto and got to a friend's house and recovered there for a better part of, I guess, of 10 days or something. I saw my brother and Chris Shepard, and they were all like super supportive and shit. And I got back and I weighed like, I remember I weighed like, I was a pencil when I got back. And it took me a few months to return back to normal, get my head space and stuff like that. And in the meantime, American Recordings had come up to Vancouver, and they basically came up to Vancouver to give me and Dwayne shit. Basically sit in the room, basically sit us down and tell us, well, guess what, guys? You guys are fucked. And then we're trying to explain them. No, I think you should listen for a second here. I think you guys need to understand how badly you fucked us by going into this whole plan about this and that. And though we are responsible, what we'd like you to do is we'd like you to go and apologize to Rave. And we would like to finish the album the way that we feel that we should have done to the beginning. And so they actually agreed. I said, okay, we're going to go back and we're going to apologize to Rave. And we're like, thank you. And I remember, being clean at that point and being at this point, I almost felt like this is like, I'm wiping the slate clean and I'm going to try and make this a new beginning. I'm going to try and make this everything I can make it. And so we got back together with Rave in October of 1994 and started working on the album. And we worked straight through up until pretty much we got the resignation from Ogre. It was like full steam ahead. We're going, here we go. We practically redid everything. Even Rave flew down to LA and redid the vocals. Everything that we had done probably was redone. So it was like, it was a real album. It was the real Skinny Puppy album. And when Ogre quit, it just sent Dwayne, that was it. He was like, okay, my songs weren't utilized. I hadn't been really spoken to in such a manner to give me respect in my songs. And plus that, the last few tours have been impossible to deal with the levels of tension that have been going down. So I see Dwayne just completely lose it.
Yeah, it had built up for a while to this point for him.
Yeah, so, I'm getting back to the other story about Greg Black here for a second. This is where we left off the story. When I found out that Dwayne had died, I immediately asked for Phil to come over. And he took a little while to come, but when he did come, the first thing that I said to him was, the package that was sent to Dwayne with the heroin in it, that by the way got tested later, and was something like what they called killer heroin. It wasn't fentanyl, it was just pure heroin. And it said apparently in the note something like, sorry, Dwayne, had to wait for the good stuff. So it was like, it was a purposeful sort of letter and a purposeful package that had been sent by Greg Black, even though he knew that Dwayne had left to go back home to recover. Greg sent him a package knowing that this was like probably the riskiest thing that a person could ever do. I mean, why would you do that? I started thinking to myself, when I became clean, when I walked away and I finally was like, oh, I never can do this again. I went to the store one day to see Phil. Greg Black was there. He took me into the back and I was like, okay, let's smoke one. We're smoking one. And Greg said to me, so I heard you quit. And I said, oh yeah, best thing ever happened to me. He goes, oh man, there's nothing I look forward to more than going home to my fresh point. And I was like, did I really just hear that? And he said, if you ever need a place to come, get some, just call me. I'm right across the street. And I said, Greg, that's probably the worst thing you could ever say to me. And from that point on, I was like, I really didn't have much respect for Greg. Let's put it that way. So when we marched over to the store, I told Phil about the package being from Greg, and he couldn't believe it. We went into the store and walked to the back, and we were talking to the manager, the other manager of the store, and Phil just burst into tears. So Greg Black was up at the front at the cashier, and he closed the door of the store, and he came back with the tray in his hand with the cash. And he looked at me and goes, "What's wrong?" And I immediately looked at him and I said, "Greg, Dwayne died from the package you sent him." And he just collapsed. He just like on his knees on the floor. And I said, "Greg, I didn't know what I was going to say to you. I didn't know what, but I'm sure that this experience will probably be a horrible thing to live through. And that's enough for me. I know that's got to be tough. And I feel really sorry for you right now." And that's how I left. I left there that minute, right that day. And I didn't see Greg Black again. We didn't see or hear about Greg Black for a little while until 1 year later, almost to the day, Phil got the call to go identify Greg Black's body. Greg Black suffocated himself with a plastic bag in an attempt to try and, I don't know, it just seemed like he tried to OD, but he couldn't. Sort of like the guy that couldn't OD and had to end up killing himself. So what's really strange is I always got that feeling from Greg that it might be a horrible thing to think, but it's like, have you ever had that feeling from somebody that says, if I can't be involved with something, I'm going to take it down? I've had that feeling from Greg for so long, ever since, about that and that feeling. And it's just something that, I don't know, kind of like a feeling I've had to live with ever since. And it's really one of the toughest things. But there is one more tougher thing that I had to deal with. And that was after Dwayne died, we had a wake, and people should very caring, and then a lot of strange things started happening. A lot of people started acting certain ways, and a lot of bad things started happening, which I still can't relate to these days. I mean, just for one thing, Dave Ogilvy has not spoken to me in 22 years. Now that's something that I can't explain. You know, I've attempted to contact him. We certainly were friends. And then as soon as I asked him, you know, I won't go into detail. I asked him a certain question. He basically just shut the door on me. So basically, you know, there's a lot of pain for me involved with Skinny Puppy and moving forward and the whole thing. And Greg lived after that in Dwayne's room and was even using Dwayne's stuff. And it really bothered Phil at one point when he saw Greg Black grab Dwayne's bike to go out for a ride one day. And Phil said, "What are you doing?" And he just called him on it. So from that moment on, you know, Phil and Greg, who were also very close, by the way, like some say, you know, Phil and Greg were very good friends. And, you know, inevitably Greg just was banished, so to speak. And then some very strange things happened. And I know Phil got, you know, incredibly down and depressed. And Phil's had his own share of drug problems. And where they lived, where the apartment was, is right in the middle of what you might call the hardest part of town in Vancouver. It's like drug alley, Hastings in Maine. So basically that's where people go to peddle their goods, to basically get a score. They shoot up kits you know, basically for free everywhere. Needle dispensary, you name it. It's an impossible place to live for an addict. And it really contributed to me to the depth of how severe Phil's addiction would inevitably become. But after it all was said and done, and Phil sort of kind of started liquidating things, which I didn't really have. I never went to that place ever again. I didn't really have anything to do with it. I got a message one day from a guy in Portland, And he said, "Hi, Kevin. I received a package, and I just feel so bad about having this package. And I just wanted to make sure that this package came back to you." And I'm like, "What is it?" And he goes, "It's pages of Dwayne's diary that I bought from Phil Western." And I thought, like, this can't be. I said, I didn't want to go into detail about it, but I said, "Please, yes, send them here. They're probably better to be sent here than anywhere, especially with a stranger. And especially since the fact that Phil had apparently sold them for $200, which I can't really understand that. But Phil and I had a falling out for a couple of years at that point. And I was really trying to understand, like, why he would do that. And then one day, I mean, I was so terrified to read what was in this package. I was so terrified to read what was in this package that I didn't open it, I'm going to say, for 5 years. And the reason I was terrified is because I didn't want to hear, to be honest, I didn't want to hear that I had hurt him. Even though I felt that I hadn't, there was just some weird gut feeling that by reading his personal feelings that I might discover something that I didn't want to know, like something that would even hurt me more, even though I'm already carrying like years of, I can't get over this hurt type of pain. You know what I mean? So one day I just said, okay, that's it. I don't know what it was. Something happened, and I'd had enough, and I opened it, and I read it, and then all of a sudden I realized that it was an explanation. It was like as though your mind can think for years. What was it? Why? Why did this happen? And then I have like an explanation right in front of me in writing, and I'm reading it, and it pointed to exactly what I thought it was. And that was a very broken heart, a very personally broken heart. And that also very much appreciated his friends, his studio, and what he had no animosity to spare for that in any way, but was lost on the concept of how someone couldn't want to speak to somebody on Christmas after they weren't in their life anymore. And I thought, like, my God, this is as sad as it is, and as, I don't know, as wrong as it is, it almost gave me an answer, and it gave me something to move forward with and give me a good feeling about that I had done my best. And I don't know, since then, it's amazing that it's been 25 years. But you know, when Phil died, it was like, oh boy, here we go again. It was like the identical case scenario unfolding again. And I thought, like, wait, this is a little bit too much like the other. And I started to realize that, you know, maybe my body's going to go into its similar defense tactics and stuff. And it did. And so I find myself back at the situation 25 years later, quite affected each day. But I'm not too sure if it's that I'm actually affected specifically by Dwayne, or if I'm affected by the specific loss of loved ones and close friends and everything. My mom, my dad, Al, Phil, Dwayne, whoever it might be, Debbie. You know, I can think of so many names of people that we've lost. And I start to realize that it all boils down to one thing, and that is make the best of the time you have with the friends you have while you have them. Appreciate them, and just don't make the mistake that you'll have regretting. That's a pretty long-winded speech, but that's where my feelings are at today.
Here, for we'll drink to that. I lived in Vancouver, I believe from like 89 to 91. And I spent a lot of time hanging out with Dwayne. He was I was living with you at the time. And we would just be hanging around and stuff. And uh, it was a real important relationship in my life at that time because I'd basically left everything I'd known behind and gone to Vancouver, this new universe, right? So I was plugged into this world with all these different people, all these different pasts and stuff. And I had to leave Vancouver because of some family stuff. And I always tell people that I'm no different than these people that we heard about in that story. I would have probably succumbed to the same, weaknesses that other people did. I'm no different, and it's just by luck and by circumstance that I wasn't there. And Dwayne was a really brilliant mind. He was a very smart person, and when you would talk to him about subjects like drugs and stuff like that, he had a very, very open mind about discovery, expanding consciousness, and stuff like that. And so I think that his approach to those things was kind of cerebral. You know what I mean? He was a very, very highly intelligent person. I mean, you can look at his understanding of keyboards and synthesis and MIDI paths and signal flow and all that stuff. That guy's brain worked on a different level than other people. So of course, I think that he felt that he could be smart about things, he could control things. And I think um, the one thing that I would tell people is that, like, it doesn't matter how smart you are, it doesn't matter who you are. The circumstances in your life that we all have, we all bring to the table a certain amount of baggage, and that makes us kind of susceptible to certain things. And it's a shame to say that this person was lost, and it's a cliche that his talent was great and it ended too soon. But the fact that it happened to him is, it means it happens to anybody. It happens to all of us. We all have, like I say, we all have our baggage. We all have our things that we deal with on a daily basis, and it shapes who we are. And I feel blessed for having Dwayne as an influence on my life at a very important part of my life. I still feel the influence that um, he put in me. He was a great friend. Hilarious.
Yeah, for sure. I should say that, after I read that letter, actually, it wasn't shortly thereafter that I called Phil after about 2 years of not speaking to him. And I said, Phil, I think I all of a sudden understand why you let that letter go. And I'm not saying I approve of it, but I think I understand it. It's like you wanted somebody to know the reason why, and it's a touching story. I mean, I think like the most depressed I've ever been in my life, for sure, was when you feel heartbroken. You know what I mean? And when say, for instance, when your friend hasn't spoken to you in 4 months, that fucking hurts you. When your fucking friend hasn't spoken to you in 22 years, that fucking hurts you. When you can't change something that you feel you'd like to change, that really seems to hurt. I don't know. I think that when I think back on our experiences that we shared when we toured Skinny Puppy, for the better part of those tours that we did Scully together, they were so innocent. They were so like without a lot of we had a lot of fun. I mean, we basically
look at our ages. How old were we then?
The thing
I
is
started
that
when I was 19.
Yeah, but you don't look any older to me. He kind of looks like a biker guy now.
Yeah, well, this is my COVID mustache.
I kind of like it. You still got the good hair.
Well, it's I can't cut it. I need a haircut. And if I didn't have this mustache, I would look very girlish because I have very fine hair. Not like Dwayne. Dwayne had the coarse hair.
I wonder if Dwayne would still have his amazing hair today.
Ooh,
I
that's
would,
a good question.
I
You know
would
what?
encourage, I would love to have seen his hairstyle of this moment.
I went with him to Edmonton one time. I believe it was right before Last Rites. I think we went there to pick up. We went there in the infamous Network Whale. We drove there to pick up some items that he had that were a little bit bigger to mail and could put in a car. And I remember, I think it was like we maybe spent a week doing this, maybe like 3 or 4 days. And I met his parents, met Diane. Shout out to Diane. Um,
Hi,
uh,
Diane, if
seeing
you're out there.
seeing Edmonton, and he kind of a brief introduction to some of his friends and stuff like that. Um, that was a lot of fun. I really felt like I got to see a part of Dwayne, and I'm trying to think right now, what kind of hair did his dad have? Did he have? I mean, that would be funny if Dwayne if Dwayne would start to lose his hair.
I
He
don't
would
think so.
he would look like Larry Fine from the Three Stooges because his
Yeah,
hair just had so much structure; it would stick straight up.
it's a good amount of hair there. I don't think it was going anywhere.
Oh, poor Dwayne. I had so much. I had so much fun with that guy. Um, just uh, his perspective on the world was so uniquely different. You know what I mean? Any like any experience that we were all having. Let's say we're on tour somewhere, we're at a restaurant, we're seeing at a venue or something like that. Dwayne's perspective was always uniquely different than everyone else's, and that was something that I really appreciated. He had a very unique look at the world, and the guy was a genius. Nothing short of that. And I can only say that in retrospect. Um, you know, he definitely made it an indelible impression upon me. I'd like to think that all the people, all the big important relationships in your life as you develop really shape who you are as an adult. And there is definitely a lot of Dwayne in me. I would like to hope. I like to keep the
Well,
more beautiful aspects of his personality in my heart forever.
we're the ones carrying the memories, and they say these are the people that keep you alive. Is the people that share your experiences and your spirit, and this is what we do. I don't think. How many times, Scully, on what we call Dwayne Day, August 23rd, have we been in a nice place celebrating? I
Well,
mean, how many times?
20 years, 20
Amsterdam.
years ago, 20 years ago, we were in Amsterdam
Yeah.
following
Was it
the Doomsday Show.
Oh my God, it was 20. No, Scully, we were also there 15 years ago, I
Yeah,
think.
yeah. We were in Amsterdam. We were in Amsterdam a few days after Doomsday.
And then we were also there I think it was the 15-year anniversary. We were also in Amsterdam. But anyways, we always make a point of wherever we're at is making this day special and doing something special. I know I always with Rihanna would do something special. Hey, Rihanna, we always go out and do stuff. I don't know what we're going to do today. It's too hot out. There's got coronavirus and all that stuff. There's not a lot of stuff we can do today, but I was always thinking about what Dwayne would like as far as keyboards and instruments today.
Oh,
And I
well,
think like
he would
that's
definitely be.
that I miss is that he would probably be onto something that we wouldn't pick. He was always onto something that was like obscure, or maybe not obscure, but like not like what everybody else chose.
Oh, well, he was definitely on the his understanding of things put him out on the cutting edge of stuff. You know what I mean? Like what I was saying about the Kurzweil. He absorbed this stuff. Like I don't know how, like a new piece of gear could come out, and like I could read the same manual that he was reading, and it just did not stick in my head. The way that it would stick in. He just had like this comprehension of things that was on a genius level. Especially when it came to like electronics and music and stuff.
Some people have said Ray Kurzweil could be a Martian, and I truly could believe that. I mean, the guy is not just an inventor of synthesizers, but he's kind of like Elon Musk, kind of like all over the place. But there are modes inside the K2000, K2500 that are called fun mode, and you might want to say that I've never seen fun mode in almost, I don't think, any other keyboard, but it's like a type of machine that can be made and can't be bettered. It's like for that machine, I think it was like one of those perfect machines. But I really wish that today I could see what Dwayne would choose.
Well, just with like Virtual Studio and Virtual Synth, just think of what Dwayne could have on a laptop. You know what I mean?
That's my favorite pick. We took this in Stanley Park, right in XY, right square where that village would have been. And at this moment when we took this pick, we didn't know about XY. Nobody told us the story of that.
Your hair is very fluffy.
Is Dwayne and I many times rode bikes into the middle of Stanley Park, and we would go meet at this one place. It was a gathering of rocks, and since then I found out that that's old XY remains. So now it makes sense. Before we were like, oh, did a bunch of hippies build this in here? No, 3,000-year-old Salish Indian village. Anyway,
Dwayne was not a good bowl. Dwayne was not good at bowling, though. I will say that.
But his sliding style, when he would go to the floor and let it go, it was so smooth.
It was so haphazard, though. It really, he was not a consistent bowler. I will say that.
Yeah. Those were the days. It would have been me and you and Chubby and Dwayne
piling up in the Volkswagen.
4 people in a Volkswagen going to the bowling alley.
We would go early before like studio time often if there was something going on out in the studio. Yeah. And the only time that we would go is the same time that all the senior people would go. So it would be a bunch, you, me, Chubby, and Dwayne. We'd always like take one of the last lane in the aisle, and the rest of the bowling alley was full of these old people that were coming from like senior homes and stuff on shuttle buses and stuff for the money pin.
Yeah.
If the money pin came up and you got a strike, you get a bowl for free.
What's your highest score? What's your highest score?
My highest score, I believe, was like a 210.
I worked my butt off, and one day I got a 257. And that's the highest I could ever do.
No, are you using your ball and your own shoes?
Yes.
Well, that doesn't qualify, because when we were at Lionsgate Lanes, we were using house balls and house shoes.
That's true. No, I had never even. I don't even think that I even broke a 200 back in those days on those lanes with those balls.
It was tough.
It's really hard to break a 200. I'll start talking like Canadian. It's real hard to break 200.
Do you remember Dwayne's fresh sausage sign?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
He had in his apartment somewhere in the early 90s. I don't know where he got this. I think there must have been like a grocery store that had been, gone out of business. He acquired this gigantic neon sign. I'm going to guess it was about 8 feet wide, and it was like the words "fresh sausage" in cursive, and it was glowing red. And he put that up in his apartment.
I remember. He had it on some black corrugated sort of.
Some sort of weird like egg carton dimply plastic stuff that he put on the wall. I remember that.
I'm trying to see if there's a photo of it. There isn't. Yeah.
The old fresh sausage.
Fresh sausage, Dwayne. I think he got that from his friend Michael, actually.
Yeah, he probably could. You know, Dwayne also had a couple of like secret talents. He could stick his finger, his pinky finger, up his nose up until the second knuckle.
What?
You never saw that? He could stick. I swear to you, he could put his pinky up his nose to the second knuckle, and he could also do this thing where he could make his eyes, the pupils of his eyes, like vibrate. You don't remember that either?
I do remember that.
And he also had this ability to disappear whenever he needed to. There was
that's the story.
Cincinnati. In Cincinnati, on the 1988 Vivisect tour, we had the fake dog Chud that would get disemboweled on stage every night. And I guess like somebody had called the police saying, "Hey, they're mutilating animals on stage here," because this prop dog that we had looked very real, but it was all synthetic. And I was actually on stage after the show breaking down the gear and stuff. And these guys in like plain clothes came by and said, "Hey, you know, we're from sector 25 or whatever. And we're here about some dog stuff." And I'm like thinking like, "Oh, these guys are animal control." I did not realize that they were cops. And so this is at Bogart's in Cincinnati, infamous venue. And so I led them downstairs to where the dressing rooms were. And as soon as I got to the door, they sort of like bulldozed past me. And like you, Ogre, Dan, our manager, we're in the dressing room. This is like right after the show. And I believe that Dwayne was rolling a joint on a paper plate.
It was.
And sitting on a chair, and like the cops come in and they're just like, "All right, everybody sit down," blah, blah, blah. And Dwayne literally just calmly puts a paper plate of weed down and just calmly walks right out the door.
Well, not only that, but I had already been handcuffed, and Dan, our manager, had already been handcuffed, and Ogre, and someone got handcuffed. I can't remember if it was me or if it was Ogre, for calling the cop an asshole, saying, "Hey, you're a fucking asshole," and he goes, "You're going to jail." And then it was then we realized that these guys are cops, because we didn't even know who they were. And then at that point, Dwayne just stood up, and I was looking right at him handcuffed. He just stood up. He had like a plate with weed on it, you know, rolling it. He just took the plate, he put it down. I saw him put something over it, and then he just stood up and walked right past everybody, right out the door, as though he was
totally invisible.
Totally
Absolutely invisible. That was the magic of Dwayne.
I fully agree. I agree to that.
You know, he was also a huge fan of Yellow. I should also say that.
Yeah, and as a matter of fact,
I've been listening to Yellow all day today in preparation.
Yellow has a new album coming out, and I've just been ecstatically listening to these videos coming up that are just mind-boggling, how right on these guys are still like exactly the same sound as they were.
I was just going to say that. I don't know how it is that like they can put out a record today that sounds exactly like something they put out 25 years ago, and in a good way. You know, they still have their sound.
Yeah, I can't figure it out either. This is like, to me, like the classic Dwayne. This was like a few months before he passed away, and I know by this point it hadn't gotten bad yet. You can see we got Rave there on the right. That's Ryan Moore playing bass, and Dwayne, and we're in the studio jamming just while we're making the process at the very end.
One of the great things that I've observed about Dwayne as a musician is he had a really unbelievable concept of space within like the audio field. Like during a jam and stuff like that, he would never ever present something that would step on someone else. You know what I mean? He knew where all the vacant spaces were, and he knew almost instinctively what to put in that space. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Well, Dwayne was a real player. So when basically the opportunity was there for him to make a solo. It was especially by this time, you know, he was like literally, I guess he'd kind of turned into Sun Ra by this point.
I've never seen him throw an elbow into a keyboard though.
Does he on this?
Look at that. Look at the headgear. I can tell by that hat that that's 1993.
This is 1995.
95?
Yep. This is shortly just before Dwayne died.
Is that in the blue jacket?
That's Mitch, our friend Mitch.
So that looks like the SY-77 and a Prophet 5 right there.
That's the Prophet. This is the K2000, of course.
K2000? Oh,
That's the K2000.
I can't see on my phone. I just saw a cloud of smoke. Do you remember the original Hilt session and the recording of the song "Come Alive"?
I sure do.
That's a moment of Dwayne magic right there.
Improvisation captured on tape.
One take.
One take. Oops. Yeah, what really blows me away is that, you know, that was a sort of example of a one take song. The song Scully's talking about, "Come Alive" off Hilt. It's just sort of like a jam between Dwayne and Al that we turned on the tape, and Al was also jamming the lyrics.
Well, I thought that Al couldn't hear what Dwayne was playing.
Oh no, he could.
I thought that they were happening independently of each other.
No, he could hear it as
he could hear it in his headphones.
yeah. So basically, yeah, no, that's how that song came down. Is that you know, half the songs that are, it's really weird, is that a lot of songs, say for instance, that we used to record back in the day, say for instance, mostly I guess Tear Garden, was a lot of improvisation in the studio where we'd come in to the control room and then in fact sound checks or certain songs were recorded that we didn't know were actually being recorded. So we come in and be like, oh, we just did a sound check, but wait, the song's already recorded. Okay, so that method became quite surprising. Like if you could surprise somebody by capturing something they didn't know you got, that was almost like better than first take. It was like you didn't know you were doing your first take. Yeah, the guitar I added later on that song.
That's a great moment of Dwayne magic right there.
Wow, everyone's here. Hey, Spivey. Hey, Dre.
What's up, Dre?
How you guys doing? Good to see you on the side here. Thanks everybody for tuning in. I realized, Scully, we've now chatted over 2 hours, and Rihanna is screaming, not screaming, she is sighing, "I'm hungry." Okay, so I'd like to thank you, Scully, for dropping in with me today. I realize it's 4:06. I realize you probably got something to do in 14 minutes.
Oh, of course, it's COVID.
Yeah. Cheers to you, my friend.
Yes, here's to memory of one of our greatest friends. Cheers.
Let's cheers to that. I've got water, but cheers to Mr. Dwayne Rudolph Goettel, one of the greatest human beings I've ever known.
AKA Bassmaster Dwayne, AKA Duck Goat Soup Crane.
His Heinous from Uranus.
Heinous from Uranus. Dwayne is heinous from Uranus. Oh, good days, good days.
Big love to all you guys out there on Patreon. Diane, if you're still there, big love to you. It's been great chatting with you lately. Everyone, thanks for tuning in. It's time for us to leave, and we'll leave you for another Sunday. Enjoy yourselves.